Hello and welcome to Behind the Headlines for the week ending July 17th, 2020. I'm Michael Curran from the Ottawa Business Journal. Behind the Headlines is a new podcast that explores the top local business stories of the week. And as usual, I'm joined by two of my colleagues from OBJ, Peter Kavesi and David Solly, both working in the editorial department. In today's podcast, we'll take a look at Ottawa entering what's called Phase 3. We'll also take a look at whether businesses should be asking customers to sign waivers if they enter their premises. And finally, a counterintuitive expansion plan for a local retailer. So let's go behind the headlines right now. Peter, let's start with you on our first story. Phase 3. That's what we're entering today in Ottawa and much of the province of Ontario. Tell us what that means.
So it's a really, really exciting news for a lot of businesses, particularly restaurants, which are now able to resume indoor services, as well as gyms and theaters and bars that they can once again start operating. So this is really, really exciting for a few reasons. I guess the first one is obviously these businesses can start bringing customers back in the door, but I think there's also the potential to, again, one more degree of normalcy back in our lives. So if this is combined with continuing relatively low incidence of new cases, I think can go a long way towards boosting both business and consumer confidence. Obviously, again, this is welcome news, but I think it does have to be tempered with some realities. There's a lot of these businesses that still have a bit of a hole to dig themselves out of. Just one example, OBJ spoke with Iron North Studio in Hintonburg. It's a gym, and since the pandemic hit, they lost approximately $100,000 in revenues during that period. Even now, once that they reopen, they're only going to be able to operate at about 50% capacity. So that's just one example of I think a lot of businesses that need to are going to have to find some new footing in this new environment, and does sort of indicate that there is still a bit of a road ahead towards full recovery.
And Dave, let's go to you next. Of course, the news came quite quickly about Phase 3. I think it was announced on Monday, and businesses had a few days to adapt to this. How are businesses changing to be able to welcome these customers inside their premises?
Yeah, Michael, that's a good question, and I guess the answer is, I think vigilance is on the mind of pretty much every business owner in town, and everybody's handling things a little bit differently. I talked to several businesses this week after the province said that Phase 3 would be a go as of today. So, for example, Escape Manor, which many of you might know, they've got several locations in town. They're an escape room. So they obviously have a lot of people moving around in there, and so they're really going to be making sure that they really focus on deep cleaning. So they're going to have a gap in between each session to make sure the rooms get cleaned properly. And obviously they have a lot of interactive sort of exhibits, right? Puzzles and various problems you have to solve that involve touching objects and surfaces. So those have had to be redesigned so that you aren't touching them. As well, when you come in, often in the past, maybe if you came by yourself, you might get put with a larger group of other people. Well, that's not going to happen now. You stay with the people you come into the building with, and that's it. Masks are going to be mandatory, obviously, in common areas. So that's just some of the ways that they're dealing with it. Pubs and restaurants, well, that's another issue. Again, you're going to have a lot of people gathered in a pretty small area, and managing that is going to be a challenge. So at Centertown Brewpub Flora Hall, for example, I talked to owner Dave Longbottom, and they're set to open today. They can have up to 50 people in there. It usually seats a maximum of about 140. Now, I don't know if some of you may have been in there. Let's just say I am somewhat familiar with the layout, having been in there several times. There are two levels, yeah, as you know, Mike. There are two sets of stairs. So Dave was telling me, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. Are we going to have one set of stairs for only for people going up, the other one only for people going down? Because otherwise, you've got to worry about people congregating in those type of areas, waiting for the bathroom, that sort of thing. So he said the biggest challenge is going to be really to kind of manage that flow of traffic, if you will, throughout the pub. So those are just and then Peter mentioned gyms. Certainly, I talked to Jenna Ladd, the owner of Iron North. They're really going to be emphasizing cleaning and physical distancing. I also talked to Freeform Fitness, where they've got the services of a cleaner that uses ultraviolet light to do a deep sanitization of the premises if necessary, if someone does happen to contract COVID and enter their premises. So these are just some of the measures that businesses are prepared to take to make sure that they can do business as safely as possible in phase 3.
Well, there's a natural transition there as we move on to our second story, which involves the legal implications of allowing customers into restaurants, gyms, and other types of premises. Dave, you looked into that this week. Some law firms are recommending that business owners consider having customers sign waivers to protect themselves in case people hopefully not, contract COVID-19 when they're in their premise. Dave, tell us about who you spoke with and what they said.
Yeah, so exactly, Michael. This issue kind of really became a bit of a talker early in the week. Actually, St. FX University in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, made a lot of headlines when they announced that they were going to require all students to sign waivers before they could take classes this fall. And that kind of triggered, the thought, okay, what are some businesses thinking about this? So this week I talked to Tracy Lyle. She's the head of litigation at Nelligan Law here in Ottawa, and I wanted to get her opinion on this issue, whether this is something that should be top of mind for business owners. Is it necessary to get customers to sign waivers to say, look, if you get COVID after coming in here, we're not responsible, that sort of thing. And it's a bit like most legal issues. It's a little bit thorny. I mean, it depends on the business is essentially what it comes down to. And so Lyle told me that, the riskier the environment, essentially, the greater the need for a waiver. And that in some cases, it definitely would provide an added layer of protection against potential lawsuits. So for example, we were just talking about Freeform Fitness. Well, that's a good example of the type of business that probably should get a waiver for all its members. And in fact, they do. Ashley Laurie, the CEO there, she told me that they've always required members to sign waivers. They've now updated them with a clause mentioning COVID-19. She said it's just all part of them doing their due diligence to make sure that, they protect themselves. A lot of other sports organizations feel the same way, but other businesses not so much. For example, I talked to a couple of restaurant owners, Stephen Bekta. Many of you have heard of him. He owns 3 restaurants here in town. He compared going to a restaurant to going to a supermarket or a hairdresser. Customers should know the risks before they enter the premises. So he felt there was no need to do that sort of thing. The same with Dave Longbottom at Flora Hall. He said he checked with his insurance provider and he just felt it's not necessary. Both of them are taking contact information from a person at each table to help with contact tracing should it be necessary. And Lyle kind of agreed with that approach. She said, make sure you double check with your insurance provider to see what they think. But in many cases, it's, you have to really weigh the sort of the logistics, the logistical headaches, if you will, of having to require everybody that comes into a building to sign a waiver, weigh that against the risks. So it's a decision. That every individual business owner is kind of going to have to make on his own.
I think we'll go to story number 3. Dave, you took the lead on this one as well. It was a story about a local retailer called Terra 20 that is doing something we're not seeing too often, opening a new location in the middle of a pandemic. So, Dave, give us a sense of what's happening with Terra 20.
Yeah, like exactly. Terra 20, some of you may know it, may shop there. It's a chain of eco-friendly stores here in Ottawa. So it specializes in merchandise like natural skincare products, bathroom, household cleaners that are made without toxic chemicals. Well, Terra 20 already had 2 locations in Ottawa. Now they have 3. They opened on earlier this week, actually yesterday. They opened their newest location, a franchise location at the Ottawa train yards. So you're thinking, wow, like most retailers are kind of thinking scaling back their brick and mortar locations with the rise of e-commerce and everybody buying things online now, especially during the pandemic. But I talked to co-owner Bill Stewart on Tuesday, and he basically said, that they really feel like there's still a place for an actual physical location for a store like this, because as he points out, he says a lot of their mission is kind of converting people to eco-friendly products. They're targeting the mainstream consumer, and they want to kind of turn them on to greener, eco-friendly products. And he says that as far as he's concerned, that still means they need a place to go where they can actually touch the products and have a look at them and really get to know more about them and talk to staff who can kind of educate them about what goes into the products and what doesn't go into them in terms of harmful chemicals and other additives. So he really feels like this is a great time to open a new store. And they did actually close their other locations in late March when the pandemic started for several months, and their online operations managed to keep them afloat. They were doing about 70% of their regular revenues, but he says they're very glad to have their stores up and running again and add to their footprint. And he says they're looking to add more stores. They're talking to potential franchisees in Toronto right now. And he thinks that the National Capital Region could certainly easily that the market here could certainly support several more stores.
Probably evidence that there's still room for niche retailers in the local market. Particularly when, as you indicated, they need a little bit of education and might need to touch the product, feel the product, so on and so forth. So let's start wrapping up. But before we do that, Peter, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about a project that's over 5 years old now at OBJ. It's called Techopia, which is a spin-off brand that focuses a lot on technology startups. What's happening with Techopia, Peter?
Well, part of the Techopia project is a special podcast series we've been doing for several years, Techopia Live, in which we do interviews with leaders from Ottawa's tech community. So we do have a couple of episodes scheduled for next week that I'm particularly excited about. The first one, so it was put to me that not many businesses really had much or any time to prepare for COVID-19 this spring. Things happened really, really, really quickly. In contrast, though, as we do gradually reopen and restart our operations, companies do still have, a month and a half or so before that fall season when traditionally business activity here in Ottawa really, really accelerates. So we'll be talking to a local tech company, Pivot Tree, just about how their leadership team is preparing for this new normal, this idea of, we're likely going to be seeing mixed teams. Some are going to continue to work from home, some want to be in the office. How do you manage teams like that? We also have another episode which is going to be featuring Clinic Connects. This is an Ottawa startup that made a name for itself in medical clinics with its automated patient reminder system, letting patients know and confirming that they have an upcoming appointment. What's interesting is that at the start of this year, before the pandemic hit, they were really well positioned and starting to make inroads in the long-term care sector. Obviously, COVID had a really devastating impact on a lot of those centers, which has really created incredible demand for this Ottawa company's software, and has made 2020 a year quite unlike any other in the company's history.
That's awesome. Thanks for that, Peter, and we'll look forward to those upcoming episodes. That's all for this week in terms of Behind the Headlines. A reminder that you can watch this on YouTube. If you go to the Ottawa Business YouTube channel, please give us a like on the video, hit the bell icon to get notifications of new videos. Also, you can listen to this in an audio format on Spotify and SoundCloud. And lastly, we encourage all of our listeners and viewers to check out obj.ca, which is the main vehicle for our local business news headlines today. And a reminder, we've got a great email newsletter, OBJ Today, that you can sign up for too. So that's it for this week. I'm Michael Curran signing off on behalf of Peter Kavesi and David Solly. Please stay connected. Hope to see you really soon.